Welcome to Monk's Temple. Settle in. Let's talk about a quiet truth, a feeling often hidden in the shadows of spiritual seeking. It's the feeling that arises not in struggle, but in the aftermath of a breakthrough. It's the hollow, echoing space right after a moment of profound clarity or peace, when you look at your ordinary hands, your ordinary room, and think, is this it? The coffee tastes the same. The traffic still annoys you. The luminous connection you felt has dissolved, leaving the world feeling strangely two-dimensional, even mundane. This disappointment is not your failure. In the profound psychology of the Buddha's path, this specific disillusionment is a critical, necessary teacher. It is the sign you have outgrown the map and are now standing on the unmapped territory of reality itself. Let's reframe this with a new metaphor. Imagine your consciousness as a vast, clear lake. For most of your life, you've been fascinated, and often tormented, by the activity on the surface. The waves of anxiety, the ripples of joy, the stormy peaks of anger, the still pools of calm. You've believed your entire reality was this surface play. Your spiritual journey, then, becomes an attempt to calm the waves permanently, to achieve a state of perfect, glassy stillness. You work hard. And sometimes, you succeed. The wind drops. The lake becomes perfectly still, mirroring the open sky. You experience a profound unity, a silent, boundless peace. You think, I've done it. This is the goal. This perfect stillness is enlightenment. But the nature of a lake is to interact with wind. A breeze picks up. A single leaf falls. Ripples form. And with them, a deep, gutting disappointment. I lost it. The stillness was an illusion. I'm back to being choppy and disturbed. This is the pivotal misunderstanding. The Buddha's wisdom does not point to the temporary stillness of the surface as the goal. It points to the nature of the water itself. The water is equally present in the raging wave, the gentle ripple, and the perfect calm. Awakening is not about achieving a permanent surface condition. It's the profound, felt realization that you are the water, not the weather happening upon it. The disappointment is the last gasp of the identity that was addicted to perfect weather. True peace is not the absence of waves, it is the unshakable depth that remains undisturbed by any surface activity. To make this psychological insight practical, let me share an original story. Years ago, I knew a master potter named Leo. He was famous for his perfectly symmetrical, exquisitely glazed vases. They were flawless, the result of decades of controlling every variable, the clay's moisture, the wheel's speed, the kiln's heat. For him, spirituality was the ultimate control. To craft a perfect, unchanging state of mind. After a retreat, he had a vision where he saw all form as empty, all clay as just earth. He felt a tremendous release. Eager to bring this wisdom to his craft, he returned to his studio. He sat at his wheel, centered a lump of clay, and closed his eyes, trying to channel that emptiness. He opened them to find he had thrown a simple, slightly lopsided rice bowl. Rough. Unadorned. He looked at it, then at his shelf of glorious vases. A wave of cold disappointment washed over him. My vision was so vast, he thought. And this is what I produce. This crude thing. My hands have betrayed the truth. For days, he was paralyzed. The bowl sat, drying, on the shelf. One evening, hungry, he mechanically reached for it, filled it with stew, and ate. As he did, he felt the coarse texture in his palms. He noticed its humble weight. It served its purpose perfectly, without drama. In that moment of simple use, the dichotomy collapsed. The sublime vision and the humble bowl were not at odds. The vision of emptiness didn't demand perfect vases, it allowed for useful bowls. His art wasn't about imposing an ideal form onto clay, but about participating in the clay's potential in each moment. The disappointment was the echo of his old standard, the quest for flawless beauty, judging the new expression of grounded utility. His awakening was learning to feel the truth not in spite of the lopsided bowl, but within its very form and function. If this shift from seeking perfect vases to appreciating useful bowls resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. Your presence here helps sustain a space for these deep, practical conversations. Now, let's translate this into a modern, psychological context. You have a transformative insight about forgiveness. You see how holding a grudge has been a prison. You feel a weight lift, a spacious compassion for the person who hurt you. You feel free. Then, a few days later, you hear their name, and that old, familiar knot of resentment tightens in your stomach. Immediately, the story appears, I'm a hypocrite. Nothing really changed. The insight was fake. This is the lake's surface rippling again. The psychological trap is the belief that the insight, the momentary stillness, should have deleted the old neurological and emotional pattern. When it doesn't, we conflate the returning feeling with a total failure of growth. The Buddhist framework offers a more compassionate and accurate model. The insight and the resentment are not enemies. They are both contents appearing in your awareness. The insight revealed the space of forgiveness. The returning resentment is an old, conditioned wave in that same space. Your work is not to condemn the wave, but to meet it with the knowledge of the space. You can think, here is the old knot. It has arisen. It is not who I am, it is a pattern passing through. This is the application of Anatta, or non-self. You are not the resentment. You are the aware space noticing it. This small shift in identification, from being the feeling to being the awareness of the feeling, is the essence of psychological liberation. It turns a moment of disappointment into a moment of empowered mindfulness. This is where we meet the core Buddhist principle of impermanence, Anicca, not as philosophy, but as a therapeutic tool. The feeling of expansive forgiveness was impermanent. The feeling of contracting resentment is impermanent. The feeling of disappointment about the whole cycle is also impermanent. Our suffering spikes when we demand that a pleasant state become permanent, and when we fear an unpleasant state has become permanent. The actionable practice is to inwardly nod at each changing state with the phrase, changing, changing. This isn't passive. It is an active retraining of your attention to align with reality's fundamental law. You are not trying to stop the change. You are learning to relax into the flow of it. The disappointment itself becomes just another changing weather pattern in the sky of your mind, worthy of observation, but not identification. We've begun by redefining spiritual disappointment as the necessary death of a fantasy, the fantasy of a permanently calm surface. We've introduced the metaphor of the lake and the water to illustrate the shift from identifying with experiences to identifying with the awareness that holds them. Through the potter's story, we've seen how awakening integrates into imperfect, human expression. And we've started to build a psychological toolkit, using Anatta and Anicca not as abstract concepts, but as immediate lenses for meeting emotional triggers with wisdom, not with war. Let's continue. We've begun to see disappointment not as a setback, but as a sign we've contacted something real, so real it shatters our prettiest ideas about what awakening should feel like. Now, we must examine the very architecture of that expectation. Where does it come from? It comes from a deep, almost instinctual place within the human psyche, the craving for certainty. We want enlightenment to be a solid thing, a certificate we can frame, a permanent upgrade to a better version of ourselves. The Buddha's radical insight, the core of his teaching, directly dismantles this craving. It's called Anicca, impermanence. But we must understand this not as a poetic observation about falling leaves, but as a psychological law governing every millisecond of your inner experience. Every thought, every feeling, every state of consciousness is in a state of birth, decay, and death. The profound peace you felt was always going to pass. The disappointment that followed was always going to arise. Your suffering isn't caused by the passing. It's caused by the internal argument you have with it, the silent scream of, "No, not yet. This one should stay." Here's a modern, actionable way to work with this. I call it the labeling practice. It's deceptively simple. When you notice a state arising, anxiety, calm, disappointment, joy, simply label it to yourself, silently, in a neutral tone, thinking, feeling, remembering, worrying, happiness, contraction, release. Do not judge the state as good or bad. Do not try to change it. Just place a simple, accurate label on it. What this does, psychologically, is create a tiny but critical gap between you and the experience. You are no longer fused with the anxiety, you are observing the phenomenon of anxiety. You are practicing Anatta in real time. You are the aware space doing the labeling, not the temporary weather being labeled. This practice, drawn directly from the Buddhist Vipassana tradition, turns every moment of disappointment into a fieldwork session in freedom. Let me illustrate with another original story. I once worked with a woman named Clara, a dedicated meditator and a mother of 2 young boys. She had cultivated a beautiful, serene practice during her morning sits. She described touching a silent, maternal space within that felt infinite and patient. Then, the school day chaos would erupt. Spilled milk, missing shoes, sibling fights. Her serenity would evaporate, replaced by a sharp, shouting frustration. Afterwards, she'd be crushed by disappointment. "My meditation feels like a lie," she told me. "The real me is this impatient screecher. I'm just pretending to be peaceful." I asked her to try the labeling practice, not on the cushion, but in the storm of the morning. The next time the frustration arose, she was to try, even in the middle of raising her voice, to internally whisper, "Frustration. Tightness in chest. Voice loud." She reported back, amused and shocked. "I was yelling about the toothpaste cap," she said, "and in the middle of it, I heard myself think, frustration. And for a split second, it was like I was watching a play. I was still frustrated, but I wasn't only frustration. There was a part of me just noting it. And in that gap, I took a breath. I didn't stop being annoyed, but the scream turned into a firm instruction. The disappointment later was softer, more curious than damning. Clara discovered that her real me wasn't the screecher or the serene meditator. Her real me was the capacity to witness both roles come and go. This is the integration Buddhism promises. This leads us to another cornerstone of the path, often misunderstood: detachment. We hear this word and think of coldness, of checking out, of not caring. That is not the Buddha's detachment. True detachment, or non-clinging, is the ultimate psychological flexibility. It is the ability to be fully engaged in life, to love your children, to do your work, to enjoy a meal, without your happiness being held hostage by the outcome. You can be fully in the argument without your sense of self-worth being on the line. You can desire a promotion without your peace collapsing if you don't get it. Disappointment after awakening often comes from misplacing our clinging. We stop clinging to money or status, and start clinging to peace, to oneness, to being a spiritual person. We've just switched the objects of our addiction. The awakening is meant to break the mechanism of clinging itself. Think of it like this new metaphor. Imagine your mind is a masterful Velcro strip. Every experience, a pleasant one, a painful one, a spiritual one, is a little fuzzy ball that comes along and sticks. Your identity becomes this clump of everything that's stuck to you. Awakening is like the moment the Velcro is turned over, revealing the smooth, hookless backing. The fuzzy balls of experience still come, the bliss, the boredom, the disappointment, but they don't stick. They roll across the surface and away. At first, this feels terrifyingly empty. Where am I? Nothing is sticking. This is the disappointment of non-clinging. We miss our familiar, clumpy identity, even if it was painful. We have to learn to find our sense of being not in a collected clump of experiences, but in the bright, aware, empty space that holds the capacity for all experience without being defined by any of it. Let's explore this with a story from outside the spiritual world altogether. I knew a brilliant cardiac surgeon, Dr. Aris. His skill depended on perfect detachment. He couldn't afford to be emotionally entangled with the fragile heart under his lights. He saw a parallel in meditation and pursued it fiercely. He achieved remarkable focus, a surgical calm. Then, his own father was diagnosed with the very heart condition he operated on. Dr. Aris was not allowed to operate. Sitting in the waiting room during his father's surgery, his meditative calm shattered. He was a son, terrified. When his father recovered, Dr. Aris came to me in confusion. My detachment failed. When it really mattered, I was just a scared child. My practice was an illusion for controlled environments. I asked him, in the operating room, when you are detached, what is present? Focus. Clarity. Steady hands, he said. And in the waiting room? Love. Fear. Helplessness. So, I said, you have defined detachment as focus and clarity, and failure as love and fear. What if the Buddha's detachment isn't about which set of feelings you have, but about your relationship to all of them? The surgeon's focus is a form of love in action. The son's fear is a form of love in waiting. The detachment that failed was just a specific tool for a specific room. True non-clinging is the space that can hold the focused surgeon and the terrified son, without judging one as spiritual and the other as a failure. Can you allow the terrified son his place without thinking he ruins the surgeon? Dr. Aris's disappointment was the collision of a professional ideal with raw humanity. His integration was allowing both to coexist, seeing that his capacity to feel so deeply as a son was the same wellspring that fed his dedication as a surgeon. He wasn't failing at detachment, he was learning its true, vast meaning. This is the middle way in practice. It is not a lukewarm average. It is the dynamic, intelligent balance that includes the full spectrum of your humanity, without getting stuck at any extreme. It's not about feeling only calm. It's about feeling the storm with a calm center. The disappointment is the grief we feel when we realize we must include everything, even the parts we'd rather disown. So, we've deepened our look. We've seen impermanence as a law to align with, not fight, using tools like labeling. We've redefined detachment as non-clinging, the Velcro of the mind losing its hooks. And we've understood the middle way as the inclusive embrace of all our human roles, the serene meditator, the frustrated parent, the focused professional, the vulnerable child. Each is a temporary costume. Awakening is the realization that you are the one trying on the costumes, not the costume itself. The disappointment is the sadness of the costume you loved, perhaps the enlightened being robe. Realizing it, too, must go back to the rack. Now we must turn to a principle that is the very engine of both our suffering and our liberation, a concept that Buddhism illuminates with unparalleled precision, dependent origination, or praditya samutpada. This is not merely philosophical decoration. It is a practical, psychological map of how experience constructs itself moment to moment, and how the feeling of disappointment is meticulously assembled link by link. Simply put, nothing exists independently. Everything arises in dependence on conditions. Your moment of awakening depended on conditions, perhaps silence, a teacher's words, a receptive mind. The subsequent disappointment depends on another set of conditions, the expectation for that state to continue, the habit of comparing present moment reality to a memory, the subtle identity of being a person who has awakened. See the chain. One conditioned thing, the bliss, gives rise to the next, the craving for it to last, which gives rise to the next, the aversion to its absence, which gives rise to the next, the disappointment. The chain feels solid, inevitable. But the Buddha's genius was to see that if you understand the links, you can loosen them. You don't attack the feeling of disappointment head-on. You bring gentle awareness to the conditions that are giving rise to it right now. Let's make this actionable with a modern example. You're scrolling social media and see a friend's post about their serene meditation retreat. You feel a pang, a mix of longing and inadequacy. Then, you remember your own recent glimpse of peace, which now feels distant. The comparison, condition, gives rise to a story, they can maintain it, I can't, link 1, perception with ignorance. This triggers a sinking feeling in the gut, link 2, feeling. Then, a tightening, a contraction, link 3, craving for it to be different. Finally, the full, familiar weight of spiritual disappointment settles in, link 4, clinging/becoming. The traditional 12-link chain is happening in seconds. Your work is to interrupt the automation. The moment you feel the initial pang, you can pause. You can label, comparing. You can feel the sensation in the gut without buying the story that follows. You can note, this is a conditioned response to a screen. By doing so, you don't fuel the next link. You begin to decondition the mind. This is the profound psychological repurposing of an ancient Buddhist insight. I witnessed this chain and its dissolution in a powerful way with a musician named Sylvie. A violinist, she experienced a flow state during a performance where she disappeared, and there was only the music. It was her awakening moment. For weeks after, every time she picked up her violin, she was trying to recapture that loss of self. Consequently, her playing became stiff, forced. The magic was gone. The disappointment was devastating. She considered quitting. Her chain was, memory of no self, condition, - craving to recreate it, link, - forced effort, link, - tension and bad sound, link, - a story of failure and disappointment, link. Her breakthrough came not from trying harder, but from investigating the chain. I asked her to play one note, just one, with no goal whatsoever. Just the note. Then another. To pay exquisite attention to the sensation of the bow on the string, the vibration of the wood against her collarbone, the sound waves in the air. In other words, to shift her attention from the goal, recreating a past state, to the conditions of the present moment sensory experience. As she did this, the chain of craving for the past state lost its power. The conditions for simple, present moment engagement were met. The music didn't return in a grand way. It began to flow again, differently, because she was no longer trying to force a dependent link from a bygone set of conditions. Her disappointment was the product of a broken chain she kept trying to reforge. Freedom was in starting a new, simple chain in the present. This brings us to a vital and tender point, self-compassion. Western psychology rightly champions it. In the Buddhist framework, it is a natural expression of understanding Anatta and praditya samutpada. When you see that your disappointment is not a personal failing but the inevitable result of a chain of conditioned phenomena, including years of cultural conditioning that says enlightenment is a forever high, how can you not meet yourself with kindness? The you that is disappointed is just another temporary configuration of conditions. Meeting that configuration with harsh judgment is just adding another painful link to the chain. Meeting it with compassionate curiosity is the beginning of a new chain, one that leads to understanding and release. Let's invent a new metaphor for this integrated view. Imagine your mind is a grand, old train station. Thoughts, feelings, and sensations are trains arriving and departing on set schedules, your conditioned patterns. The moment of awakening is like becoming the station master who suddenly realizes, I am not any of these trains. I am the space of the station itself. And I don't have to get on every train that comes in. But old habits die hard. The disappointment express pulls in on its usual track. For a moment, you, the station master, forget. You see the familiar train and think, that's my ride, and jump aboard. You're halfway to the next town of despair before you remember, wait, I'm the station. I can get off. The disappointment isn't in the train's existence. The trains will always run. The disappointment is the momentary forgetting, the automatic boarding. Your practice is to spend more and more time as the aware, spacious station, greeting each train, the 3:15 to disappointment is here. Letting it idle, and watching it depart without you having to be a passenger. This is mindfulness combined with non-identification. I'll share a story about a CEO, Mark, who learned this the hard way. He used meditation as a performance tool. He'd achieve laser focus, make a huge deal, and feel a high of success that he conflated with spiritual accomplishment. Then a deal fell apart. The crash wasn't just financial, it was an identity crash. The disappointment was existential. My clarity failed. My meditation didn't work. He was a station master who only valued the success bullet train and thought all other trains were trespassers. In his despair, he came on a silent retreat. For days, he battled boredom, irritation, and aching knees, trains he hated. One afternoon, sitting in pure physical misery, he had a simple, clear perception: this knee pain is just a sensation. It's not my failure. It's just a train called pain sitting in the station. In that moment, he didn't board the train of story about the pain. He just felt the sensation. And a strange peace arose, unrelated to pleasure or success. He realized the peace he'd been chasing in deals was just one type of train. The peace of the station itself was unconditional. His great disappointment became the very condition that showed him a peace that no deal could ever give or take away. This is the turning point. The Buddha's path does not make you a better station master who only attracts pleasant trains. It reveals you were never truly a passenger to begin with. The disappointment, the fear, the joy, they are all trains. Your true nature is the silent, allowing space that holds all the tracks. The work is to stop buying tickets. We have now woven together several core threads. Dependent origination as a chain we can loosen through present moment attention, self-compassion as the wise response to seeing our conditioned nature, and the powerful metaphor of the train station for non-identification. We are moving from seeing disappointment as a problem to be solved, to seeing it as a particularly instructive train arriving at the station of our awareness, offering us another chance to remember who, and what, we really are. We arrive now at the simplest and most profound refuge, the present moment. In the ache of spiritual disappointment, the present often feels like the problem, the flat, empty space where the magic has faded. We are haunted by the ghost of a past peak or fixated on a future where we've permanently recaptured it. The Buddha's radical, practical insight is that freedom exists nowhere else but here. Not in the memory, not in the hope, but in the raw, unfiltered data of now. Your disappointment is a narrative spun about the present, using threads from the past and future. The practice is the gentle but firm disentanglement from that story, to meet the actual substance of this moment. Let's create a new metaphor. Imagine your conscious experience is a vast, clear sky. Thoughts, feelings, and sensations are weather patterns moving through it, clouds of worry, sunshine of joy, thunderstorms of anger, and the heavy, gray overcast of disappointment. We spend our lives identifying with the weather. We think, I am a storm, or I am the sunshine. Awakening offers a glimpse of the sky itself, vast, silent, and untouched by the changing conditions. But then the clouds roll back in. The disappointment is the thought, the sky is gone. All I am is this gloomy weather. But the sky didn't go anywhere. It can't. It is the very space that holds the gloom. The goal is not to achieve a permanent state of clear blue weather. It is to cultivate the unshakable knowing that you are the sky, not the temporary climate passing through. To make this a psychological tool, try the 3-second grounding. When you feel the heavy weather of disappointment, stop. For just 3 seconds, drop the story. Ask, what is one thing I can see right now? A lamp, a texture on the wall. What is one thing I can physically feel? The chair against your back, your feet on the floor. What is one sound present? The hum of electronics, distant birds. Do not analyze, just register. This 3-second pivot does not deny the feeling. It places the feeling within a larger, stable context of sensory reality. It reminds the nervous system that while the mind may be in a storm, the body is safely in a room, on a planet, breathing. This is a direct application of mindfulness, sati, pulling you from the conceptual storm and into the sanctuary of present moment awareness. I saw this work powerfully with a client named Maya, a writer. After a retreat, she had a week of luminous clarity where words flowed effortlessly. She felt she had finally unlocked her true voice. Then, the flow stopped. Facing a blank page, she felt only dullness and a crushing sense of fraud. The clarity was a fluke. My real voice is this blocked, anxious whisper. Her disappointment was paralyzing. I asked her to try the 3-second grounding, not to write, but just before opening her document. See the light on your desk. Feel the keyboard under your fingers. Hear the clock tick. She did this for a week. One day, after grounding, she typed not a profound idea, but a simple sentence: the light on the desk is pale yellow. Then another: my coffee is cold. She was describing the ink blots of her present moment, not trying to paint a masterpiece. From that place of simple, descriptive presence, a genuine observation about her character arose, unforced, authentic. She realized her true voice wasn't a permanent state of inspired genius, it was the capacity to be authentically present with her experience, whether that experience was luminous clarity or pale yellow light. The disappointment had been the demand for only one type of weather. The freedom was in writing from the sky that held all types. This leads us to a beautiful Buddhist principle, suchness or tathata. It is the thing as it is, in its own right, stripped of our projections, comparisons, and labels. The coffee as coffee. The traffic noise as sound. The feeling of disappointment as a cluster of sensations. Our suffering multiplies when we oppose suchness. We argue with the rainy day. The practice is to open to it, to inquire into its texture without judgment. This is not passive resignation. It is active, intimate engagement with reality. The moment you fully allow the feeling of disappointment to be exactly as it is, heavy, warm, tight, whatever its signature, without trying to change it, a subtle alchemy occurs. The resistance that was compounding the suffering falls away. You are left in relationship with the suchness of the experience, and in that relationship, there is often a surprising peace. Consider a modern, psychological parallel, exposure therapy. In treating anxiety, a person is gradually exposed to the feared sensation or situation without the avoidance response. They learn that the panic attack, while intensely unpleasant, is not actually dangerous. They learn to tolerate the suchness of the anxiety until it loses its power. Your spiritual disappointment is similar. It is a cluster of thoughts and sensations you have learned to fear and avoid because they signal failure. By turning toward it with grounding and curiosity, exposing yourself to its suchness, you disarm it. You learn that this feeling, too, is a transient weather pattern in the sky of your awareness. It cannot harm the sky. Let me share an original story about a carpenter named Ben. He found his awakening in the flawless execution of a complex dovetail joint. In that moment of perfect fit, there was no craftsman and no craft, just unity. He spent months trying to recapture that in every cut, every sanding. His work became slow, hesitant, and full of error. The disappointment was a constant companion, whispering he'd lost the touch. One afternoon, frustrated, he deliberately chose a scrap piece of wood with a knot in it, an imperfect piece. His task wasn't to make something beautiful, but simply to feel the saw moving through the resistant knot. He focused entirely on the vibration in his hand, the sound of the teeth biting, the smell of the pine. He wasn't trying to achieve a state of unity. He was just sawing a knot. And in that complete absorption in the suchness of the task, the resistance, the sound, the grit, the sense of separation vanished again. Not as a peak, but as a grounded flow. He realized the unity wasn't in the perfect joint, it was in the unreserved attention to whatever was under his hands. The perfect joint had been the condition that first revealed the possibility, the knotted scrap taught him the principle. Unity is found in full intimacy with the suchness of the present task, whatever its nature. So, we have reframed the present moment from being the site of our letdown to being our only true sanctuary. We have the tool of 3-second grounding to find stability in sensory reality. We have introduced the concept of suchness, meeting experience without argument, as the path to intimate peace. And through Maya and Ben, we see that our deepest creativity and craft emerge not from clinging to past perfect conditions, but from engaging with full attention to the actual, sometimes knotted, material of the present. Let's turn now to a force that is both the cause of our deepest suffering and, when understood, the engine of our greatest growth, resistance. In the context of spiritual disappointment, resistance is the invisible fist clenching against what is. It is the inner voice that says, this feeling of flatness shouldn't be here. I should feel connected. I should be joyful. This resistance creates a secondary layer of pain, the pain of conflict with reality. The Buddha's path offers a profound alternative, surrender. Not surrender as defeat, but as a conscious, intelligent relaxation into the truth of the present moment. It is the psychological shift from arguing with the data of your experience to curiously investigating it. This is where the core teaching of the second noble truth, that suffering arises from craving and aversion, becomes a lived, actionable practice. Your disappointment is a form of suffering. The aversion is to the feeling of disappointment itself. We create a loop, we feel disappointment, we resist it, which creates more tension and more suffering, which we then interpret as further proof of our failure. The way out is to break the loop at the point of resistance. Here is a practical method. The body scan for resistance. When you notice disappointment, don't go into the story. Instead, close your eyes if you can, and bring your attention to your body. Scan from head to toe with one simple question: where is the resistance? Do not try to relax it. Just find it. Is it a clenched jaw? Tight shoulders? A knot in the stomach? A feeling of hardness around the heart? Locate the physical signature of the to know. Place your awareness on that sensation with gentle curiosity. Breathe into that space, not to change it, but to acknowledge its presence fully. Often, the simple act of bringing compassionate attention to the physical seat of resistance causes it to soften organically. You are practicing vipassana, insight meditation, by seeing the mind-made contraction as a sensation in the body. You are no longer disappointed. You are a aware presence noticing tightness in the chest. This shifts the entire paradigm. Let me illustrate with a story about a woman named Clara, a high-level executive. After a mindfulness course, she experienced a week of unprecedented patience and clarity in her leadership. She felt she had finally integrated her practice. Then, during a high-stakes negotiation, an old pattern of competitive aggression surged forth. Afterward, sitting alone, she felt a familiar cold disappointment. But this time, she remembered the body scan. Instead of spiraling into thoughts, she sat and asked, "Where is the resistance?" She found a hot, solid ball of tension in her solar plexus. She placed her hand there and simply felt it. She breathed. She noticed it was just a cluster of physical sensations: heat, pressure, vibration. As she stayed with it, the story, "I failed, I'm not enlightened," began to fade into the background. The sensations themselves changed, loosening, spreading, becoming less solid. After a few minutes, the disappointment was still present as a thought, but its emotional charge had dissipated. More importantly, she had discovered a new power, the ability to meet her own difficult emotions not as a critic, but as a compassionate investigator. This didn't make her a perfect, always calm leader. It made her a resilient, self-aware one who could recover her center minutes after losing it, rather than days. This approach is rooted in a deeper Buddhist principle: the unconditional nature of awareness. Your awareness is like a mirror. A mirror does not resist what appears in it. It does not cling to a beautiful image or push away an ugly one. It simply reflects. The disappointment, the tightness, the story, all are simply appearing in the mirror of your awareness. The suffering is the mirror momentarily forgetting its nature and trying to scrape off the reflection it doesn't like. The practice is to remember you are the mirror, not the reflection. The body scan for resistance is a way of polishing the mirror, of clearing the identification with the reflection and returning to the clarity of the reflecting space itself. Let's create a new metaphor. Imagine your stream of experience is a river. Disappointment is a cold, dark current within it. Resistance is you, standing in the river, using all your strength to build a dam against that specific current. You exhaust yourself fighting the flow. Surrender is not letting the current drown you. It is the ingenious act of stepping onto the riverbank. From the bank, you can see the entire river, the dark current of disappointment, the warm currents of past joy, the shimmering surface of present sensation. You are no longer in conflict with any part of it. You are the aware space witnessing the flow. The riverbank is the position of mindfulness. The body scan is your first step out of the freezing water and onto solid ground. Now, let's integrate this with another original story, this time about an artist named Leo. Leo's moment of awakening came during a walk in the rain when he perceived the brilliant, interconnected aliveness of everything. He felt he had been given the true sight. He rushed to his studio to paint it. But every canvas felt dead, a crude imitation. His disappointment curdled into a creative block. He resisted his ordinary perception, longing only for the true sight. He stopped painting altogether, which felt like a spiritual failure. In desperation, he finally took a small sketchbook to a busy, grimy bus station, the antithesis of his mystical reign. His task was not to draw beauty, but to draw exactly what he saw with zero judgment. He drew a crumpled soda can, a tired face, a cracked tile. As he focused solely on the lines, the shapes, the shadows, the suchness of the mundane scene, something released. He wasn't trying to portray the infinite. He was just drawing a can. In that surrender to the ordinary, the fight stopped. And to his surprise, a different kind of aliveness entered his drawing. It was the aliveness of true seeing, of intimacy with the thing as it is. He realized that true sight wasn't a special vision of rain, it was the capacity to see anything without the filter of his preferences and resistances. The bus station was as sacred as the forest once he stopped resisting its gritty reality. His art, and his spiritual path, were reborn in that surrender. This story highlights the middle way in action. Leo had swung from the extreme of ordinary, dull perception to the extreme of chasing a special, mystical perception. The middle way was found in the balanced, attentive engagement with whatever was present, be it sublime or mundane. His disappointment was the tension between those extremes. His peace was found in letting both go, and simply seeing. We have now equipped ourselves with a powerful tool, the body scan for resistance, a direct method to translate aversion into investigative curiosity. We've explored the metaphor of the river and the riverbank to understand the shift from fighting experience to witnessing it. And through Clara and Leo, we've seen that the highest professional competence and the deepest artistic expression arise not from maintaining a special state, but from the capacity to surrender resistance and meet reality. Whether a boardroom tension or a bus station can, with open, balanced awareness. Now we must address the silent architect behind much of our spiritual disappointment, the ego's final, most subtle refuge, the spiritual ego. We begin to mistake the feeling of awakening for awakening itself, and then we build an identity around being someone who has had the experience. This is a trap the Buddha warned about with great subtlety. It's the mind's brilliant trick of co-opting the path for its own perpetuation. You are no longer a person seeking enlightenment, you become a person who is enlightened, or at least awakened, and that new identity comes with a whole new set of expectations and vulnerabilities. The disappointment that arises when ordinary life returns is, in part, the pain of that cherished identity being threatened. If I were truly awake, I wouldn't feel this boredom, this anger, this pettiness. The thought itself is the spiritual ego scrambling to protect its territory. This is where the Buddhist teaching of Anatta, or non-self, moves from intellectual concept to essential surgery. Let's develop a psychological tool for this, the identity check-in. When you feel spiritual disappointment, pause and ask yourself this series of questions silently and honestly. 1. What part of me feels disappointed? E.g., the seeker, the achiever, the one who wants to be special, the one who thought they were beyond this. 2. What was the unspoken expectation that was violated? E.g., that after seeing the truth, negative emotions would vanish, that I would be perceived as calm and wise by others, that my life would look dramatically different. 3. Can I see this disappointed one as a temporary thought construction, a role being played, rather than my absolute truth? This inquiry doesn't dismiss the feeling. It places a spotlight on the mental structure generating it. You begin to see the disappointment not as proof of your failure, but as proof of a clinging. A clinging to a spiritual self-image. Each time you do this, you loosen the grip of that image. I witnessed the dramatic unraveling of a spiritual ego in a man named Daniel. He was a senior practitioner, a respected guide in his community. During a long retreat, he had a shattering insight into emptiness that lasted for days. He returned home floating. For months, he played the role of the wise, unshakable sage with his family and friends. He subtly, and not so subtly, let them know he had glimpsed a reality they hadn't. Then, his teenage son got into a serious scrape with the law. Daniel's first reaction was not compassion, but hot, searing shame. What will people think of the awakened man whose son is a delinquent? Then, a cold despair that his insight had not made him a perfect father. His disappointment in himself was catastrophic. It wasn't just about his son, it was about the death of his enlightened persona. When we spoke, he was shattered. I led him through the identity check-in. Through tears, he answered, the disappointed part was, the awakened one. The expectation was, that an awakened person's family would be harmonious and his reactions would always be perfect. Seeing that, he managed a bitter laugh. I traded my ordinary ego for a spiritual one. And it's even more cruel because it judges me for being human. That recognition was his true second awakening. He had to surrender not just his small self, but his spiritual self. His work became to meet his son's crisis not as the awakened one, but simply as a frightened, loving father, flawed, full of shame, but present. It was in that humble, egoless space that genuine healing with his son began. The disappointment had been the breaking of a mask. The freedom was in the raw, unprotected humanity that was revealed underneath. This process aligns with the Buddhist ideal of shunyata, or emptiness. It doesn't mean nothing exists. It means all things, including our most cherished self-concepts, are empty of independent, permanent existence. They are dependent, contingent, and fluid. The awakened one identity is empty. The disappointed seeker identity is empty. Seeing this emptiness is the ultimate disillusionment, and the ultimate relief. You are freed from having to protect any of these ghostly costumes. Let's create a new metaphor. Imagine your mind is a stage. Various characters come and go, the anxious one, the happy one, the wise one, the disappointed seeker. Before awakening, you are backstage, completely identified with whatever character is in the spotlight. You think you are the anxious character. Awakening is the moment you realize you are not any character. You are the stage itself, the silent, spacious, allowing platform. But then, a sly director, the spiritual ego, sends out a magnificent new character, the awakened one. It's a compelling role, played with serene gestures. For a while, you forget you are the stage and get lost in this best role yet. Disappointment is the moment the script goes wrong, another character, the irritated parent or the jealous partner, storms onto the stage, disrupting the serene performance. The pain is the awakened one character's distress at being upstaged. Freedom is remembering, again, that you are the stage. The stage doesn't care which character is on it. It holds them all equally. The identity check-in is your prompt to step off the stage and remember you are the wooden boards and the space above them, not the drama unfolding upon them. To solidify this, here's a story from a different domain. A celebrated athlete, Maria, used meditation to find the zone, a state of effortless, thoughtless peak performance. She won a major championship from this state. Afterward, the media dubbed her the Zen champion. She began to believe this was her true identity. In the next season, every performance was an attempt to be the Zen champion again. She became stiff, self-conscious. Losing a minor match, she felt a fraud. Her disappointment was intense. She wasn't just an athlete who lost, she was a spiritual ideal that had been disproven. Her coach, a pragmatic man, told her, "Stop trying to be Zen. Just be an athlete who meditates. Sometimes she's in the zone. Sometimes she's nervous. Sometimes she wins. Sometimes she loses." The Zen champion is a story someone else wrote. Your job is to run, hit, breathe. Maria had to dismantle the spiritual brand she'd built. She started her pre-game routine not with, "I need to find the zone," but with, "Here is my breath. Here are my feet on the ground. Now play." She reclaimed her experience from the identity. Her performance became fluid again, not because she was always Zen, but because she was no longer at war with her own humanity. The disappointment had been the friction between an impossible ideal and a living, breathing person. Her peace was in accepting the full range of the person, who could access profound focus but also feel nerves, and who didn't have to label one as true and the other as false. We have now tackled the most subtle layer of disappointment, the letdown of the spiritual ego. We have the identity check-in as a scalpel to dissect its expectations. We've used the metaphor of the stage and the actor to understand the shift from playing a spiritual role to being the awareness that hosts all roles. And through Daniel and Maria, we see that whether in family life or on the world stage, ultimate freedom and authenticity come not from perfecting a spiritual persona, but from the courageous, humble dissolution of all personas, meeting each moment from the open, empty ground of being. We have journeyed through the landscape of disappointment, not as bystanders, but as mapmakers. We've redefined this feeling not as the end of the road, but as the most honest signpost you will encounter. It points away from the mirage of a perfected, permanent state, and directly toward the vibrant, messy, alive reality of your own experience. The Buddha's path does not end in a triumphant arrival at a destination called enlightenment. It culminates in a homecoming. A return to the ordinary, with extraordinary eyes. The core teaching, the heart of Buddhism we've circled around, is that freedom is found in the nature of your relationship to this moment, not in the moment's content. Disappointment is the friction that arises when your relationship is one of demand, demanding that this moment be different, be more, be like that other moment you once had. The entire spiritual arsenal, mindfulness, non-clinging, impermanence, non-self, equanimity, are all tools to change that relationship from one of demand to one of intimate dialogue. Let me leave you with one final, grounding metaphor. Imagine you are learning the art of woodworking. At first, you fight the wood. You want the stubborn grain to bend to your will, to match the perfect table in your mind. You are in a constant battle, and your results are full of strain. This is the seeker, fighting their own experience. Then, you are shown a masterpiece. A piece where the wood's natural grain, knots and all, is the central beauty of the design. For a moment, you have a vision of harmony. You think, I must make wood look like that. This is the peak experience, the awakening high. You return to your bench and try to force your wood to replicate that harmony. You fail. Disappointment sets in. This is the post-awakening letdown. The master craftsman, embodying the Buddha's wisdom, finally whispers, "Stop making the wood into something else. Learn its nature. Feel its hardness, its softness, its direction. Your skill is not in imposing a form, but in collaborating with the material. The perfect table is not a shape in your mind. It is the shape that emerges when you listen to the wood. The disappointment was the grief for the image in your mind. The true art begins when you put that image down and pick up the plane, not to conquer, but to converse. Your life is that wood, grainy, knotted, beautiful, resistant. Your awareness is the craft. The spiritual path is the slow, patient learning of that craft. So when you feel that familiar flatness, that sense of, is this all there is? I invite you to pause. Don't see it as a regression. See it as the wood speaking. It is saying, the fantasy is over. Now, let's work with what is actually here. Touch the grain of this moment. Feel its texture without wishing it were silk. Hear its sound without comparing it to a symphony. This is the path the Buddha laid out. It is not a path from human to superhuman. It is a path from being lost in thought about reality, to being in profound, compassionate relationship with reality. The disappointment is the final breaking of the dream. What remains when the dream breaks is not nothing. It is everything. It is your life, waiting to be lived not as a spiritual achievement, but as a direct, felt, sacred experience, one ordinary, astonishing moment at a time. Welcome to the beginning of the real journey.